Why are 70% of the people that watch YouTube male? Does that make any sense?
Women are more interested in fiction than nonfiction, and men are opposite to that. So if you look at book buying preferences, for example, women tilt towards fiction and men tilt towards nonfiction. And if you want to know why that is, it's because the most reliable difference that psychologists have ever found between men and women, the biggest difference, is interest. So women are reliably more interested in people and men are reliably more interested in things. Now there's still overlap. It's one standard deviation, which is a big difference. But that isn't to say no women are interested in things, because some are, and no men are interested in people, because some are. Like, I'm a man who's more interested in people than things. That's why I'm a psychologist. You know, I actually have a relatively feminine personality structure because I'm pretty high in negative emotion and I'm pretty high in agreeableness. And that's the typical feminine structure. And that's an interesting discussion to have too, because, you know, we have this idea in our culture that you can be a woman born in a man's body. And that's not true. But you can definitely be a man with a feminine personality structure. Like 10% of men are as feminine in their personality as the average woman is. And vice versa, 10% of women are as masculine in their personality as the average man is. Now, you can move those boundaries around and say, well, it's 5% and 40 or something. It doesn't matter. But the point is, there's plenty of men who are as feminine in their personality as the average woman. That doesn't mean they're in the wrong body. It just means that men and women are more alike than different, even though they are different, and that there's huge range within both genders. And we need to know this.
So what do you think is happening with trans people then?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of trans people.
Okay,
First
trans
of all,
men, or excuse me, trans women, men to female.
Well, then I would say it depends on what period of time you're asking that question about. Right now, if you look at teenagers, for example, who want to switch genders, 95% of them are unbearably confused. That's what's causing that. And I think there's other reasons too. I think this is a conjecture. When the trans teenagers came after me when I opposed Bill C-16 in Canada on compelled speech grounds, I spent quite a bit of time watching them. And I already kind of knew about that fluid identity crowd. So when I was at Harvard, piercing and tattooing started to become a cultural rage. And I was interested in, well, who's doing this? Because I knew it was a practice that was limited to criminal subtypes and outcasts for a long time. So, for example, if you worked in the circus, you were likely to be tattooed, you know, and you toured around the circus, and that was a kind of carny life, and it was an outsider life. And if you were a prisoner, same thing. But then all of a sudden it started to make its inroads into the popular culture. So we studied a group of early adopters of tattooing and piercing from the perspective of personality. Like, who are these people? And they were all highly creative people. Well, and creativity is a trait, and all people who aren't creative, that's wrong. In fact, most people aren't creative at all. And I can explain that later, but they're not. We developed a scale called the Creative Achievement Questionnaire, which assesses lifetime contribution to 13 different creative domains. And that your scores would range from 0, I have no training or talent in this area, to, I think it was 8. I'm an internationally recognized expert in this area, right? And so 70% of people, if you sum their scores across all 13 domains, scored 0. And I ask audiences, like, how many portraits have you painted? 0. How many songs have you composed? 0. How many plays have you written? 0. How many recipes have you invented?
Let me stop you.
So the tattooed types are high. They were high in creativity.
Okay.
And a lot of these people who are fluid in their identity are actually high in trait openness. And they do have fluid identities. And some of them are feminine men and masculine women. So, yeah, but that doesn't mean that surgery is the cure for that. It does not mean that. Not at all.
Well, what do you think it means when someone is so attracted to the idea that they were born in the wrong body? It means so much. They're so compelled that they're willing to go through surgery to change.
God, it means all sorts of things. I knew a kid in Toronto who was on the autistic spectrum, and a lot of the people who are manifesting serious issues with gender identity are on the autistic spectrum.
This is
by
like
the way.
Abigail Schreier's work
Yeah,
and
yeah,
rapid
yeah.
onset gender dysphoria
Yeah.
amongst women.
Yeah, well, that's a different thing, the rapid onset. That's more like, so part of the reason I objected to Bill C-SOX 16 to begin with was because I knew full well as a clinician that as soon as we messed with fundamental sex categories and changed the terminology, we would fatally confuse thousands of young girls. I knew that because I knew the literature on psychological contagion. And it stretches back like 500 years, that literature, 300 years. It's all outlined in a book by Henri Ellenberger called History of, what's the name of the book? History of Psychoanalytic Ideas. It doesn't matter. It's Henri Ellenberger, and it's his main work if you want to look it up. And so